So in the last lecture, I was ending, just kind of introducing Theodosius the Great. Um, Sometimes I think that a lot of people who just did a little studying of Roman Christianity think that it was Constantine who made Christianity the official religion. Actually, I can speak for myself that a few years ago, that's the impression I had. As I mentioned, Constantine legalized it, and he gave it, started giving it a certain special um, position in which it was becoming advantageous to be Christian, but he didn't make it officially um, the religion of Rome. In 380, um, it becomes the official religion. Now, what does that mean? Well, Christianity, as a small um, religion, as we know, was persecuted. Um, that people were thrown to the lions in Roman gladiatorial events and burned, all sorts of terrible things. Um, but now it goes in reverse. So there's basically a ban on paganism. So before, paganism was the thing, and as we've studied, that Rome had many mystery cults, Eastern cults, all sorts of things, Isis, Serapis, all these things. Well, now visits to the temples were forbidden. Remaining pagan holidays were abolished. The Vestal virgins were disbanded. Destruction of pagan temples, suppression of the Serapis cult. They went all the way back to the Ptolemies in Egypt, and Manichaeanism, as I briefly discussed, are all going to be suppressed. And the emperor then becomes God's spiritual authority on earth, which was termed Caesaropapism. In other words, he came up with this idea that, this is the full convergence of spiritual and secular power all put into one. Okay? And he was the last emperor to reunite under his authority the western and eastern halves of the empire. So this really solidifies Christianity, and it does serious violence, if we will, to the religions that are not a part of it. And it's not going to be able to eradicate paganism. It's too much a part of so many different aspects of society, but this is the start. Okay. So let's talk about St. Augustine. And here he is an important figure. He was a Roman African saint. And now I say African. He, I believe, was a settler. I don't know. He's got darker skin here. He was not a sub-Saharan African, but he was born in Africa and lived in basically what is present-day Algeria. Okay. He was very influential on the development of Western Christianity. Cannot be overstated. Sorry. He developed the concept of Catholic Church as the spiritual city of God. Okay, so the institution of the church as like the actual institution of the church being part of the Christian experience. Okay, and it's different than like going to a church. I'm not talking about a church like the church building you go to on Sunday, but like the Catholic Church, the institution of the church as the spiritual city of God, and henceforth an agent of God, maybe the same as having the apostle, or even better yet, Jesus' presence with you. So you don't need to rely just on scripture, essentially, and that's going to be talked about later in response to the Reformation, but its implications is that for when Protestants later are going to accuse Catholics of having all these non-biblical teachings. But really going back to St. Augustine, the idea is that that the Bible and the church don't contradict each other, but the church is as authoritative, has God's spirit in the way that the scriptures were spirit inspired. And so, if a certain teaching from the church doesn't show up in the Bible, it's not a contradiction anymore than if a New Testament teaching shows up that's not in the Old Testament, if you follow that. Okay. In any case, he is not always a Christian. As I mentioned earlier, he was in one of the earlier lectures, he was into Manichaeanism. He was into a mysticism that was heavily influenced by a Persian mystic, mixing Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and Christianity. But he converts in 386. He's an ordained priest by 391, and he becomes a famous preacher. And shortly before his death, Roman Africa was invaded by Germanic Vandals that had converted to Arianism, as we remember. Okay, so the European world, the Mediterranean world, and the African world, and the drama of the infighting of Christianity are all coming to a head. The Germanic people being integrated into the Roman Empire are coming to a head. All of these things within that we're seeing in this history here, okay? And so we have the First Council of Ephesus. And so now I'm going to just kind of go over just some short, important church councils that are going to lead to, fundamental Christian teaching. So there was a dispute over the teachings of a man named Nestorius. He was Archbishop of Constantinople. He made a rejection of the long-standing title Theotokos, our Mother of God, for the Virgin Mary, and said that Jesus was fully human as a human. He was condemned as a heretic for this. In modern times, the Assyrian Church of the East, many of the Assyrians that are seen in the Central Valley in particular, are modern descendants of the historical Church of the East, and it reveres Nestorius as a saint, although the modern church does not subscribe to the entirety of the Nestorian doctrine as it's been generally understood. And this is going to be significant information when we talk about inter-Christian conflicts in context to the rise of Islam. So we'll return to this. So the Nestorians, the so-called Nestorians, are just simply debating about what we start seeing happen, and you're going to look over this, is that Christianity, the concept of the Trinity is complex. Jesus is fully God and he's fully human, or is he fully? Where is the God in the man, and where's the man in God, and how does that operate? So Nestorius is believing in the Trinity, but he's simply saying that when Jesus was man, he was fully man, and henceforth Mary couldn't be called Mother of God because he wasn't manifested as a God, he was manifested as man, even though he was God. And it gets complicated like that, okay? So these are the kind of things that were dividing the church and church councils. And then we had one of the most important ones later on called the Council of Chalcedon. And I'm also bringing these up again because they are going to play into, I will argue, these debates into facilitating the rise of Islam. This is going to be something that, a position that I take, that I want to expose you to this idea of. It's not universally accepted, what I'm saying, but I think there's a strong case for it. And I really kind of bought into this idea, especially looking at a book I'm going to show you called Jesus Wars by a Catholic historian named Peter Jenkins. But in any case, the Council of Chalcedon in 451, the Emperor Marcion called for a church council to meet at Chalcedon on the outskirts of Constantinople. Largest church counseling ever. And they're going to make a definition about the exact nature of Jesus at the expense of other church authorities debating about this really, what might seem to people now as a minute detail over the nature of Jesus. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to return to continue this in the next lecture.